All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm ready to get started. If you are in a place where you can put in the chat who you are and any tech tools that you've used in your classrooms, then that would be great. Thanks to Matthew and Veronica for telling us a little bit about what they use. We're going to be talking today about parent communication in the home language, and we're going to be looking at translation tech tools that are available. And so let's go ahead and get started. Because we're a smaller group, if you have a question throughout, feel free to just unmute and ask your question, because we're not a big group, so there's plenty of opportunity to have conversation around these things. So if you want to share something, share your own expertise or experiences with any of these apps we've talked about, or ask questions, feel free to jump in. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, just because it's always helpful to know why I might be interested and care about these things. My name's Katie. I'm a linguist, and some of the things we're going to be talking about today have to do with a branch of linguistics called computational linguistics. And so I'm kind of using my linguistics brain today a little bit. I am treasurer of SeeSaw 5, and so I welcome you to our conference. I'm so glad that you're here. I have been on the board. I can't remember how many years, but I think it's like 6 or 7, and love being a part of this group. So we thank you for being here at the conference today. I work as a teacher trainer and as a teacher. I teach a class to English learners at the University of Texas at Arlington this semester. I have taught at UNT Dallas for many years. So I teach, but I also train teachers. I have worked in higher ed, but also work a lot in adult ed and also in K-12. Since I was working in a school of education training K-12 teachers, I got to know a lot about ESL in Texas, and so I love working with K-12 teachers. And I've taught, for a number of years online and hybrid and flipped and face-to-face, and just love technology in general. So I'm kind of a tech nerd. That's why I get excited about these translation technologies. So big picture, throughout the pandemic especially, we have seen so much innovation as it relates to translation technology, or just technology in general. I mean, just over the past 3 to 4 years, many of these apps that we have been using for a number of years in our classrooms, such as Remind, ClassDojo, SeeSaw, the pandemic accelerated a lot of the functionality of these apps to where now they can do so much more than they used to be able to. I keep on having to update all of my slides when I train on different apps, because it changes constantly, and it's getting even more and more robust in terms of how you can use these things. Well, specifically as it relates to translation tools, we've seen a lot of innovation in the past few years. And this is great, because as we think about communicating with our multilingual families, we now have more options than ever. Many of these apps, so Remind, SeeSaw, S'more, Canvas, all of them, they are all relying on technology, either from Google or from Microsoft. And so what happens is Google and Microsoft create, they're the ones that are actually doing the innovation, and then they allow third-party apps, such as these that we use in our classrooms, to utilize their technology. And so whatever the limitations are, or whatever the new features are that are available through Microsoft or through Google, generally we're going to see those same limitations and availability in the other apps that we use. All of these rely on what we call machine translation. So I want to talk just a little bit about what machine translation is. So it's kind of self-explanatory in the name, but this is the idea that the translator is a computer or a software. This is not a live person who is doing the translation. It's not a human translator, it's a machine. There's a whole branch of linguistics that's dedicated to this called computational linguistics. And their goal, one of their goals, it's a big field, but one of their goals is to improve machine translation so that it can translate as accurately as a human being. This is what they call the human parity issue, meaning they want the machines to be on par, parity, on par with human translators. And what is so mind-boggling, what's so amazing, is that at this point in human history, despite all the advances in technology, all the money that's been thrown at this, all of the amazing brains that have tried to figure out this problem, at this point in human history, we have not achieved human parity, meaning that there is no machine translator out there that is going to be able to be as accurate as a human being. And so a human is always the preferred method of translation, but that doesn't mean that machine translation can't be helpful. There are lots of things that computational linguists do. Sorry about that. Let me go back to that. Spelling and grammar check, voice to text, auto captioning services. So the computational linguistics isn't just looking at translation, but what they say is the biggest challenge in that field is figuring out machine translation. It just has layers of complexity that, you think about voice to text. I'm always, trying to voice to text, and half the time it's, not even close to anything that I said. Even that is less of a challenge for computational linguists than translating from one language to another, because there are so many steps and so many things that the computer has to know how to do. My colleague Cindy Kilpatrick, who's presenting today and is on the Tech SeeSaw 5 board, she put this one day saying that she was doing voice to text and she was trying to say core linguistics, and every time it was saying quarreling with sticks. And so again, linguists are the one making this technology, and we can't even make the technology understand the word linguistics. So it really is, it's a challenge to do it. And then when you add in that component of translating to another language or multiple languages, it's even more complex. So some of those challenges are just that humans understand context better. And so, for example, especially in education, we have a lot of what we call domain-specific words, meaning that they mean something different in education than they mean kind of in the broader linguistic community, speech community. There's a nuanced meaning for educators. So think about the term makeup work. I was using this term with a multilingual family, and this particular family spoke Spanish, and so the translation for this in the app that we were using, it used makeup like like a lipstick and blush. Maquillaje is the word in Spanish, and that's how it translated makeup work, because makeup has a kind of a general meaning, right, that we use out in the broader world, but in education, it kind of has this narrow meaning, which means that you're needing to come in and redo some work. And so helping machines to understand which context I'm meaning and which domain that we're currently in is a challenge, because I know that I'm an educator working in educational space, but how does the computer know that? So that's one of the many complexities. Idioms, this is a challenge for English learners who, when you have something like elephant in the living room, where it's not a literal elephant in a literal living room, it has another meaning. Usually this elephant in the living room means that one thing that no one talks about. That's hard for a computer to understand. The machines have a hard time with proper nouns, with polysemy, which is where you have multiple meanings for the same word, like the bank that you go to for your money versus the bank of a body of water. Recognizing informal speech, informal language, what they call out of vocabulary words. If you haven't given the computer the vocabulary, they're not going to know how to translate it. And so that's a challenge. Typos and misspellings. If you are working with a parent who's maybe doesn't have a strong literacy in the first language, there may be some misspellings, and a computer doesn't necessarily know what to do with that. You've probably used Google Translate before as a translation tool. These are some of the challenges that the designers of Google Translate have to figure out. one kind of pro tip for using Google Translate that teachers that use it say that is very helpful to them is that they will ask it to translate something. So let's say you're asking it to translate from English to Spanish. Now you have a Spanish sentence. If you'll take that exact same Spanish sentence and put it back in and ask it to retranslate back to English, that retranslation, sometimes you can catch things like that makeup work where you think, wait, that's not what I meant. So the retranslating is kind of a quick check to see, did it get it or did it not? Okay, so those are some of the challenges. However, so there's lots of challenges. However, that doesn't mean that machine translation is just unhelpful and we should never use it and we should always use a human. First of all, that's just not practical. There's not always going to be a human translator available, especially when you have multiple languages in a school. You're just not going to have the ability to, every time you need something translated, to be able to pull that person in. And machine translation, despite its limitations, can be very useful. Where it's useful is when you're trying to get the gist or the approximate meaning of something. These translations are not going to be 100% accurate because of all these limitations. There are going to be some issues, but that doesn't mean that they're not useful. So as an example, this is my son, Hunter, and recently my family was talking about some of the current events in the world, and we were discussing Russia. Well, my father had traveled to Russia 30 years ago, maybe, and he had gotten this hat as a souvenir. And the hat had a tag attached to it that was completely written in Russian. Well, because we were talking about Russia, my dad got out the hat and was showing it to the kids and let them try it on and stuff. And as we looked at this tag, we all wonder what this means. And because it's been 30 years, my dad couldn't remember where he got the hat, what the hat, anything about it. He just knew that he had gotten this from Russia. And so we pulled out our Google Translate app. And Google Translate, not only can you just type in the text, but you can take a picture of it. And when you hover over, it will translate any words in that picture to another language. And so we set it to Russian, we hovered over, and we learned that this was produced in Moscow, Russia, that it was a rabbit fur hat. We learned how much it cost. And so not every word was translated correctly, but we got the gist. We got a lot more information than we had before, which was none. And so that's where these translation apps can be very helpful, is that, if you think about a family who is navigating a system in English when they themselves may not be very proficient in English, just getting the gist actually can be very, very empowering, because then you have some sense of what's going on. And so we find that that machine translation actually does have benefits. Just so if you've never done this on Google Translate before, you can just pull up your Google Translate app, click on camera, and hover over. This is, a great tool to teach parents, so that they know they have this available. Because say that they, it's an elementary school and they're getting their Thursday folders, and the children have come home with a stack of papers, and there could be a Scholastic book fair, there could be a notice about an upcoming field trip, there could be grades, things related to a project coming up in class, all sorts of things. And they're holding these physical papers, and they may not have any idea what's garbage, what's important, what is this? And so by hovering over those papers, they can get the gist and figure out what is this, and then they have a lot more information than when they started. So that's a great tool. Okay, so because machine translation, despite its limitations, can be very useful to these families, then we want to be encouraging them to utilize the translation features that are already built into a lot of the apps that classroom teachers are using anyway. Usually the issue is that classroom teachers and parents may not be aware that these translation tools exist and are embedded into these different apps. Plus, it's really important to name these features to let them know, hey, this is available to you, and to model for them how to access these translations, because they're all different. You know, it would be fantastic if they all could just choose a plan and stick to it, but they're all different. And so as an example, with ClassDojo, if you want parents to be able to receive communication in ClassDojo that's translated into their home language, this exists. They can do that. But the parents have to log in to their ClassDojo account and change the settings themselves. And so we have to make sure that that parents of, you know, teachers that are choosing to use ClassDojo, I definitely use ClassDojo, like my children's teachers use ClassDojo, so I'm logging into that all the time as a parent. But we need to make sure that they're aware that you log into the app, change the settings to your language, and then you'll receive ClassDojo notifications that are translated. On the other hand, think about another popular communication tool, SeeSaw. If parents want to be able to access translations in SeeSaw, completely different process. These translations depend on the language settings in the user's device. So it's not in the app itself. You don't log into SeeSaw and change a setting. You actually log into your phone. And if your phone is set to a certain language, then SeeSaw will be translated. If your phone is not, then it won't be. And so it's important, and it's got to be the language of the parent's device has to be different than the language of the teacher's device. So there's all these little details in here that are little barriers that, even though these technologies exist, keep families from being able to utilize them. And teachers themselves may not realize how these work. And so I've created a Padlet so that regardless of what you use, so any of those apps that I was just showing, if you want to scan this QR code or go to this link that I provided here, Veronica, if you're available and might be able to type that link in for me. I can't copy and paste it quickly, but
yes, I'll do that.
Thank you. Yeah. But you can go to this Padlet and you can see the instructions. Okay, for if I used Remind, how can I use the translation tools in Remind? If I use S'more for newsletters, how can I utilize the translation tools in there? So this is just a larger repository, and I'm always wanting to add to it. So if you have more that you would recommend that I add, please let me know. So part of this is raising awareness for teachers and families. Thank you, Veronica, for getting that for me. But before we move on, I want to talk about what I call the elephant in the classroom, which is that another challenge beyond just making everyone aware of how to use these things and that they exist, is that we sometimes encounter some resistance because there's questions of why should we do this? You know, aren't we supposed to be teaching English? Don't we want these families to learn English? Won't that make them dependent on the translation tools and then they won't learn the language? These are a lot of the common concerns that are raised when you talk about these translation technologies. And so I call this is, you know, the idiom I used earlier, the elephant in the classroom, is the big thing that no one's willing to say is that part of the challenge is not just awareness. Part of the challenge is kind of attitudes towards language and language acquisition and multilingualism. And so, so this is, you know, something else that we have to address. And so part of getting our classroom teachers on board with using these technologies is helping them to reframe how they think about that home language and really thinking of that home language as an asset that these students and their families are bringing. I have a picture here of The Princess Bride. This is a movie that I enjoy, and hopefully some of you have seen. I'm going to pause right there while I'm talking about The Princess Bride. I saw, Cynthia, that you asked, could you share that Padlet? Is that the question? That definitely, absolutely. That is meant to be shared. So, so please share it widely. The more people that know about this, the better, because that's what we're looking for, is folks that will help spread the word. But anyway, about the Princess Bride, there's a moment in the Princess Bride where things are looking very bleak for all of the main characters. Wesley, who is this guy here in the middle with the blonde hair, he has been mostly dead all day, and he is now needing to storm the castle to rescue his princess bride. And he asks, what are our assets? What do we have? And the other guys are saying, well, we really don't have anything. And he says, gosh, if only I had a wheelbarrow, if only I had a cloak. And Leslie says this like famous line.
Why didn't you list that among our assets in the first place?
He says, why didn't you list that among our assets in the first place? And so sometimes we don't see something that's right in front of us as an asset. And that happens a lot of times with home languages, is that we don't see them, the value that they have. And so part of what we need to be communicating to teachers and to families and to all stakeholders that are involved in the parent communication process is that there are strong reasons for why we should be communicating with families in their home languages. One of the reasons is practical. It's just, there's field trip forms and missing lunch boxes and all sorts of things that happen throughout a school day that are just low stakes thing, right? A lot of times school districts are equipped for supplying human translators for high stakes things, IEP meetings or other, formal documents that are going to go out from the school district often are translated, at least into one or two languages that are predominant in the district, right? We're prepared for those, but there are many low stakes little moments that happen throughout the school day when a teacher and a parent need to communicate. And so there's just like a practical element to this, that this helps communication. And I put in here a positive note home too, right? It's not always bad things like missing lunch boxes. Sometimes we want the parents to know the good things that are happening with their child too. So there's practical reasons why we want to use these technologies. There's pedagogical reasons. There may be questions about homework. Student may be taking a quiz in Canvas and a question is missing. This happened yesterday in my home. And so we had to reach out to the teacher to ask, clarify something about the homework. There may be student projects coming home that families need to support in. There may be opportunities where something to remember is that these parents often are language learners themselves, right? The students are learning English, but often the family is learning English together. And so typically this parent might be somewhere along the language learning journey for English. And so they may not need all things translated all the time, but they may want to be able to do a quick self-check to say, did I understand that? I think this word in English means this, but is that what it means? And so these translation tools create that opportunity for them to actually grow themselves as language learners along with their children. We know that family participation in education is huge. It's twice as predictive, according to one study, as SES status. So family participation trumps socioeconomic status. So we want families to be involved because there's pedagogical gains that happen there. So there's practical reasons, there's pedagogical reasons, and lastly, there's powerful reasons why we want them to be involved. When we give parents and teachers the opportunity to talk to each other, to be able to communicate about what's going on in the school, throughout the school day, in the classroom, this communicates to families that we value them, we value their languages, and that they belong, that they're important, that we want them to be part of this ecosystem. It also empowers teachers. I was working in a classroom with a 5th and 6th grade dual language teacher in Texas. You all probably know that in dual language programs, the ELAR teacher does not have to be certified bilingual. The other folks do, but the ELAR teacher does not have to be certified bilingual to work in a dual language program. They need the ESL endorsement. And so I was working with this teacher who everyone in her team of teachers in this dual language program was bilingual, and she was not. And she knew very little Spanish. And so her biggest challenge was being able to communicate with parents, because she didn't want to have to call in a colleague, and say, hey, I need to reach out to this parent about this small thing. Can you please translate this for me? Oh, I have something else. Can you translate this for me? That wasn't working well. And so this was a teacher who actually taught both 5th and 6th grade. So the students were with her for 2 years. And when I came along and was working with her, she'd been teaching the same group of kiddos for 1.5 years. And she had never had a conversation with some of the parents before because she didn't know how. And as I got her set up with, we ended up doing talking points, which we'll talk about in a second. It wasn't just empowering to the families to be able to communicate with the teacher. It was very empowering to the teacher to finally be able to talk with the families about concerns or issues that she had not previously been able to do, because they didn't warrant bringing in a human translator, but were still important to her as the teacher. So pedagogical reasons, practical reasons, powerful reasons. Speaking of talking points, Veronica said that she has used talking points, and talking points is very similar to Remind. And so if you already use Remind has translation capabilities. But talking points is different in that it was designed specifically for education. And so when we think about those domain specific words like makeup work, Remind doesn't necessarily, when it's translating, it doesn't think, oh, I'm in an educational space. If I see makeup, that may mean something different than what it typically means. Whereas talking point actually they have programmed it to have education specific vocabulary in it. Not only that, it was designed by an English learner for parents of English learners. And so this is someone who grew up seeing her own parents struggle to communicate with teachers and wanted to solve that problem. And so she's created this app for the purpose of being able to communicate with multilingual families. Like I mentioned, it has a domain specific glossary, which means that the different educational words are already built in there. It has pre-populated messages for common school situations that have already been pre-vetted by human translators. So there's like a template that you can use. Well, that template has already been looked at by humans. And so the likelihood of accuracy is much higher. This company does a great job of merging machine translation and human translation. For example, if the machine translation is unclear, if you get a message from a parent, you think, I don't know. I don't know what this parent's trying to say to me. You can actually send that to talking points and a human translator will look at it and be able to interpret for you. So they go kind of a step beyond. Talking points is free, by the way. It's free for classroom teachers. So if you just want an individual account, I know during the pandemic, they were offering it free as a district level for Title I schools. I don't know if they're still doing that, but certainly for an individual classroom teacher, this is a free service. They have automatic translated video captions, which is another great thing. And they also make it to where you don't have to translate every word. And so if you're like, for example, IEP or STAR, some of these words that we use or acronyms that we use, you can just put brackets around it and it won't attempt to translate that. Which makes it a lot, from getting kind of goofy translations that don't make a lot of sense. Talking points can accommodate a large number of languages. Like it was in the 80s, I think, of number of languages that you can use. And the way it works is that the teacher sends a message in English from their phone, and parents receive a text message in their language translated. This is one that I would definitely recommend that you look into. This is my top recommendation in terms of parent communication apps, just because it was designed for these issues. SeeSaw, ClassDojo, all of those are wonderful apps. They all have, there's reasons why you would use each of those. And you can get translated messages in them. But this particular one was designed with the multilingual families in mind and with the challenges of machine translation in mind. And so this is why it's kind of my top pick. The other one I want to tell you about that is just a new technology and just really amazing, like mind-blowing, is Microsoft Live Captioning. This would be, for example, if you, a lot of what we've talked about today would be asynchronous communication, or where you and the parents are not in the same room together. But let's say you have a parent information night. Very common thing that happens at the beginning of the school year, where teachers are explaining their policies and their syllabus, things like this. If you have multilingual families in the audience, they may not know what the communication that's being shared. What's really amazing is that Microsoft Live Captioning makes it to where if you are presenting, for example, a PowerPoint at a parent information night, that every multilingual family in the room can watch that presentation and look at live captions as you're talking in their home language. And so this used to be like an add-on feature for PowerPoint, but within the past couple of years, they've made it to where it's built into the software. And it has many languages that you can get the live captioning. If you happen to be a district where you are using Google instead of Microsoft, we said at the beginning that those are kind of the two companies that are driving all of this innovation. Microsoft is currently winning in the translation area. And so unfortunately right now with Google Slides, they do not have this capability. So this is Microsoft only. I will say that Google Slides now has live captioning in English, which is awesome because that's the first step to be able to offer live captioning in other languages. So I'm hoping that Google will catch up soon. But right now, this is a Microsoft only ability. And so I actually wanted to show you here. I guess it's already played. Let me try it one more time. What I do is I pull up my phone. I go to my camera, I scan a QR code that's at the first page of the PowerPoint presentation, and all of a sudden I can see the captions in English, and then I can go in and I can say I want to see them in a different language, and so I scroll down, find my language. Let's see what language I chose here, I can't remember. Romanian. And so all of a sudden, the live captions are now in Romanian. And so kind of as our last thing to do together before we move to Q&A, I wanted you to experience the magic of Microsoft Live Captioning because it's just so cool. And so I'm going to switch over to my Microsoft account, and I'm going to show you kind of how this works. And so if you have your camera, and you can open your camera. If you have your phone and you can open your camera app and scan this QR code, then you can see how this live captioning works. So let me switch over. All right, so I am now over here in my Microsoft 365 account. I happen to be teaching currently at an institution that they have this, and so I get an account to use. But when I have been in moments where I have not had a Microsoft 365 account, you can make your own. It's free to make an account. And I don't know if it's a pandemic thing. I don't know what's going on, but they gave me the first like 3 months free. And then I made a note to myself, I need to cancel after 3 months. And then when I went in to cancel after 3 months, they were like, hey, you can have 3 more months free. And so I got 3 more months. And then when I went to go cancel after 6 months, they said, you can have another month free. And so I've been writing this free Microsoft 365 gravy train for quite a few months now. And so if your district doesn't have Microsoft 365, there's still a way that you can use this technology for free. So try to get an account and see how many months you can get for free. But when I go in and I go into my PowerPoint in Microsoft 365, this is a presentation that I've created. And so if I were to present, for example, to a group of multilingual parents, I go into slideshow and I click use subtitles and I click present live. That's the whole step. Slideshow, use subtitles, present live. When I click present live, it's going to make a automatic QR code pop up. And so if you'd like to try this out so you can see what it's like, you can open up your camera on your phone. I'm going to do mine and click on that link. And what you should see is the live captioning of what I'm saying in English right now. So on your screen, and what I'm seeing is all of the words that I'm saying right now. When I do show slides, you'll see that the transcription is in English down underneath my slide. But if you go onto your phone where it says English down at the bottom, you can change it over to any language that's available. And even though what we're seeing on my screen is in English, what you should be seeing in your screen should be in whatever language. And so it is live captioning. So it's, putting the English words that I'm speaking on the bottom of the screen, but at the same time on your phone, it's live translating into another language. And so you could have multiple languages represented in an audience, and they could all be following along with the same presentation in their own language. This is a free built-in tool to Microsoft, and it's so great. As Merelda said in the chat, this Spanish is pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate. Again, is it perfect? Of course not, because it's a machine. And because of my Texas accent, there's lots of things that are going to play into the accuracy. But is it close? Is it going to give them the gist? Absolutely. And so it's a great tool that I encourage you to use in your context, wherever you are. I can, as I change slides, so for example, when I change to sample slide 2, sample slide 3, you should on your phone also see the slides changing. So the people, those reading along with these live captioning, they're not having to look up, look down, look up, look down. They can see everything that's happening on their phone. So it's a really well thought out tool, I think. So, so I wanted you to have an experience with that. I'm going to go ahead and end that session and switch back over to wrap up and take questions. So let me get back to my presentation. Here we are. All right, so that was it. So I'm wondering, what questions do you have? What comments do you have? Have you used any of these tools? Did you like them? Did you dislike them? What barriers are you finding that families have to being able to access information in the classroom? Let's discuss. Anybody, anyway? Let's see. I'll look in the chat. Yeah, Matthew was saying, very cool. I love this for a group with many different languages represented. It's a great point, Matthew. Bilingual teachers, because I was working with that teacher who, again, she was working with the bilingual team. She herself was not bilingual. And this app was so empowering for her. The bilingual teachers, where everyone in their classroom spoke both Spanish and English. The parents were generally, either spoke Spanish or they spoke English. And the teachers themselves were proficient in both languages. They were not as big of a fan of Talking Points because they felt like it was just faster for them to just type out the message in English and then type it out in Spanish. And so for them, they didn't see the value in it. And so in bilingual contexts, where again, you have the value of the bilingual person who's that human translator, some of these may not be as helpful, but certainly when you have multiple languages in a classroom, or you have a situation where not everyone is all speaking the same languages, we don't all have the same common languages, then definitely that Microsoft Live captioning is awesome. Yeah, let's see what else. I had April was asking, she said, I had no idea this was available. And that's exactly, I know, we've got to spread the word because it's available. And it's a great technology, and I can't wait till Google gets it too. Then we can do it on Google Slides. But I don't know specifically what languages are available. We can, that information is available through Microsoft, so we can find out. And with something about Talking Points is that they actually go above and beyond the languages available in Microsoft and Google. So whereas most apps are going to be limited to whatever language list Microsoft and Google currently has, that's it. Talking Points has made it a point to find out what the high frequency languages are in educational spaces in the US, and they are adding languages every day. And that's another reason why I really like them. But I don't know about that specific language. Let's see. My biggest challenge is for students who speak less common languages. Absolutely. Yeah. And there are ways that you can go and request certain languages to Microsoft, to Google, and if you choose to use Talking Points, to Talking Points. So that way they know, they know which languages are needed, and what I have found is that in, like, for example, Talking Points, every 3 or so months, they will announce which languages they have added capability for. And Microsoft is the same way, where you continue to see them growing. So if we let them know what the needs are, then hopefully we'll start to see even more languages available. But absolutely, those less frequent languages are a challenge. Thank you for sharing that. Felicia, hi Felicia, do you have any recommendations for longer text translation? Yeah, because Talking Points is going to be limited. That's a good question. I mean, I'm thinking, what do you normally use, Felicia? I'm curious. Do you use Google Translate or?
I'll just come off of mute if that's okay.
100%. Yeah. Great to see you.
It's good to hear and see you too. For longer text, I usually do use Google Translate, but I sometimes get insecure because, like you were discussing earlier, how Talking Points specifically has language that is relevant for what we do. And sometimes Google Translate isn't with it. So what I usually do is just copy and paste it from Talking Points, paragraph by paragraph. It takes a good amount of time, but I was just wondering if you had any other suggestions.
Gosh, that's a tough one. That's a great question. I'm wondering, does anyone else have a thought on that? Because I'm thinking that I don't know that anyone's going to be able to do it for education as well as Talking Points, just because they've designed for that. But like you said, the limitation is in the character limit. Gosh, it makes me wonder if we should request to Talking Points if they could create some sort of a second, like something on their website where there could be some sort of translation utilizing all that technology they already have. But I can't think of anything that's going to do it as well as that can do multiple paragraphs. Yeah, but they have it on their website, Felicia. You can go in and request. They ask for feedback all the time, and so you can go in and say, "Hey, this is what I need." And they're so responsive to teachers' needs that I feel like if you said, "Hey, this is a problem I'm running into. Love what you do, but I need more. I need to be able to do more words, more paragraphs." They may be able to provide something that would be fantastic. Anyone else? It's 10:15, so we're wrapping up. So anyone have any final thoughts before we go? Awesome. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful day at the conference. I hope that you will consider how, in whatever context that you're in, that you can help families to feel empowered, to communicate with their teachers, that you can help teachers to feel empowered, because there are practical, pedagogical, and powerful reasons for us to view these home languages as an asset and to provide means of communication. So thank you for however you do that in your space, and have a wonderful day at the conference, guys.